And did it get produced?
Yeah, it got produced in the Music Center.
Great.
New theater for now in the Amherst Theater.
And so then you were on your way.
No, but people heard about me, and one of them was Mike Evans,
Okay.
who was Lionel on All in the Family.
Yeah.
And he came to me one day and he said, look, I'm on this show called All in the Family, and my part is just the walk on and the walk off part. He said, and I understand you're a good writer and everybody's writing for the show. So what I'd like you to do is I'd like you to write a show that centers on my character.
Mm-hmm.
And I'll put both our names on it, take it in to Norman Lear, and we'll split the money. So I said, okay. So I wrote this show in which I created his mother and father, George and Louise Jefferson.
Mm-hmm.
And he took it in to Norman Lear, and 2 weeks later, Norman sent for me. And that's how it all started.
And so how many episodes did you write for All in the Family?
Just that one.
That one episode?
Mm-hmm.
But that really was the impetus that created
The Jeffersons,
the
yeah.
Jeffersons.
Yeah.
And so did you work on the Jeffersons?
No.
Why?
Well, I pitched the show in 1971.
Uh-huh.
And his first thing Norman Lear said when I came into the office was, America will never buy a black man calling white people hunky in a sitcom.
Huh.
So then I pitched Good Times, what became Good Times. That was in 71, and Good Times didn't come on the air until 1974.
Yeah.
And in those 3 years, me and Norman must have had at least 20 meetings. And the one note I got in every meeting without fail was, you have to get rid of the father. A strong black man don't work in a sitcom. So when when he did Maud, and he introduced Esther Rolle as Florida.
Mm-hmm.
So these networks decided to give her own show. And he took the show that I had created to the networks, and they said, okay. So she insisted on she didn't want a matriarchal family.
Mm-hmm.
That's why the father was on Good Times in the first place.
Mm-hmm.
So then I went to work as a staff writer for Good Times. And I caught hell because Norman Lear was an incredible racist, but he didn't think so. And everything they wrote was stereotypic. They thought of black humor as, yowza boss, I was going to go down by the river.
Yeah.
And I'd fight them tooth and nail. They'd ignore me in the offices, take that yowza stuff down to the cast. John Amos, Esther Rolle, and John Dubois would have a fit. I would give them what I had written. They said, they go, okay. Norman Lear would reluctantly shoot it, put it on the air, and it became a big hit. After the first season, even though I had done 80% of the rewrites and had 2 shows of my own that I had written all by myself that go on the air, and the white writers, all 4 of them, 3 of them, had only done 20% of the writing, and they'd only got 1 show on the air. After the first season, I was demoted, and they were promoted.
I think that was.
Shout out to the great Eric Monty, huh?
Good everything.
Good everything. Isn't it a beautiful day to be alive?
Yes.
Yes.
Yes. And let me say how eternally grateful I am. You know, I knew about Eric Monte and Mike Evans, who was the original Lionel. Now it makes me wonder, is that why he was replaced?
Let's dance. Oh, we're gonna dance with Norman Lear just for a little while this morning.
Okay, good, because somebody, and it's ironic. You sent me a text last night about this, and I didn't mention one word of Norman Lear this week. Never had room for it on the show. I don't know. It was inherent, you know. It wasn't like I was like, oh, I'm purposefully not going to evoke the name of this man.
Of course.
But watching more of Eric Monte, who you just saw, the creator of Good Times, the person that really gave us the George Jefferson that we know. Oh, George, we know him. And
That's right. Shout out to the great Sherman Hemsley, no question.
Yes,
and Isabel Sanford, who we're going to talk about along with all those black women. Come on now. Yes, right.
You already
Come on
talked
now.
about Mother Jefferson a few years ago when we were having this conversation
That's
about
right.
Brother John. Was it Brother? It was one of these. Yeah. Mother Jefferson was in Brother John, I think, and
That's right.
right. So it's like all of these breadcrumbs are being put together, and there's a full meal now because I have these disparate, ways of knowing these different people, and now it's all coming together. And as Norman Lear made transition at 101, I said this yesterday. We were talking about because Roy Wood Jr. was on the show, and we were talking about people.
Shout out Roy Wood. Did Roy say he's going to go to his Spam versus Howard next weekend in Atlanta? I can't imagine that Roy is going to miss that football game at the Celebration Bowl. But anyway,
he chin checked me over somebody. I was
what?
Yeah, because I was talking greasy about somebody because it's Friday, which is when I give myself permission to talk about people.
No question.
But somebody that went to FAMU and did all of these great things for FAMU. Now I can't even remember. Damn it, sorry, Roy. But y'all got to listen to the show from yesterday. But anyway, we were talking about all of these things in TV, and I had a clip teed up from Florida Evans from Esther Rolle about her demand of a father, but I didn't even put it together that Norman Lear was dead, and then this morning,
sorry, Esther Rolle helped you.
She did. She did.
They having another conversation right about now. If Norman Lear is over where Esther Rolle is, but Esther Rolle got this.
Oh, no, that's right.
Esther,
yeah.
Esther Rolle got this.
we were talking about two ways that people live long: evil or purpose. So like Mother Randall
and
Mother
good health care
Fletcher.
doesn't hurt. Shout out to
no, good health care is great. Let me just say that. But evil has a way of making no sense in people's longevity. I don't know how we were saying that particular orange looking person will probably live a very long time. But I said he's either going to be in jail or hell. And he was like, I don't think he's going to be in hell. I was like, hell has many different forms. Doesn't mean he's going to die. But, we'll see. Anyway.
Elijah Muhammad said, hell is on earth. Why y'all waiting on hell when you die? Ain't you in hell right now? Malcolm said, you catching hell right now. What y'all waiting on? You want to go over there to another version of hell? You better watch out. And of course, the minister himself, Louis Farrakhan, his famous recording when he converted his calypso career into singing for the Nation of Islam, white man's heaven is a black man's hell. And I would just edit that to say a white person's heaven is a black person's hell. So yeah, you ain't got to wait. You ain't gotta wait, but it was lovely for Norman Lear,
right?
For 101 years,
right. We talked about Kissinger last week being 100.
Indeed, we did.
There's something to that. I don't know what it is, but So Eric Monte, I was thinking about this whole week. I was saying that people build systems when they don't have imagination and talent, right? You build a system that you can take advantage of other people's talent or other people's labor, or other people's energy or ingenuity. You build these systems to extract, you build these systems to extract. And I think about an Eric Monte, Coolie High, which I was watching something called Black Cake on Hulu, and Glenn Turman. Oh my God, that man, like he's frozen in time. Glenn Turman is still Coolie High, this man is so
one
brilliant.
for the brothers who ain't here, pouring that libation. No question. Ways of knowing. No question.
But this man's name, Eric Monte, should be right alongside Norman Lear. When did you first meet Eric Monte, Dr. Carr?
I don't know that I would put him beside Norman Lear, because Norman Lear is, again, using our Africana framework, he represents the social structure. Ain't nobody mad at him. He did what he's supposed to do with his life. But I think this conversation we're having this morning, what does it mean to belong? Who are African people to other people? Who are African people to each other? I think we all met Eric Monte before we knew him. We know the songs, we know the plots, we know the characters. Jimmy Walker being interviewed after Norman Lear made transition said, no, actually, that's not true. And we're going to talk about this too, the September 1975 issue of Ebony magazine. And all of those are available on Google Books. Y'all can read the article on Bad Times on the Good Times set, where they fighting. And they're all fighting Norman Lear and them. And one of the things, except Jimmy Walker said 20 years from now, this is when he was interviewed, and we'll talk about this article. But Jimmy Walker said, 20 years from now, nobody's going to remember what I'm doing right now. I'm just living for right now. I'm just trying to be funny. But not only do people remember, sometimes that's the only thing they remember. So we all met Eric Monte through his work. They couldn't steal it from the man. Sued ABC, CBS, Norman Lear, and had to settle for $1 million because his lawyers told him if he didn't settle, they were going to quit. And he couldn't find other lawyers to represent him. The man ended up being unhoused. He got strung out, bounced back. And shout out to Real Black, who posts a lot of these interviews, the one, including the one we just saw on YouTube, that channel. A lot of good work there on that channel. But, we knew him without knowing his name. And for those of us like you and me and a lot of people who are in the room right now across the span, and again, this platform being invaluable for us to have these conversations. Who else going to talk about it in this depth? We knew about Eric Monte because, it's like the sister who wrote, and then the Wachowski brothers decided they was going to make The Matrix. I mean, Black folk, this is why we have to have this framework. In the governance conversation, these are conversations that we have, but when we don't really pause, as we've talked about the power to pause over the last 3.5 years, and just center ourselves, we realize with just a little bit of searching, we can verify or dismiss. We can separate urban legend from fact. There's the brother talking himself. So in some ways, we're really meeting. A lot of people today are going to meet, and over the arc of the time that this lives in perpetuity, this conversation that we have, a lot of people are going to meet this brother for the first time, voice for voice, and that's okay, because they're both ancestors now, as are many of the people in the cast of Good Times and the Jeffersons, and not only those two, but all those other shows, Maud, for example, or Different Strokes, or The Facts of Life, for example, so we get to have this conversation because that's our work. We have to recover the momentum of memory. So, we shout out to Ancestor today because somebody else passed and they gave us an opportunity to sit in our governance formation and have a different kind of conversation. That's who we belong to. We belong to each other.
And for me, Eric Monte represents the possibilities, right? And to your point, the reminder that when we have these good things that we do, when we have these amazing, brilliant ideas that other people glom onto and then bastardize and then control and then take credit for, it is our responsibility, those of us who know, to set the record straight, because this is going to be the only history, right? The only history is going to be these things were done by this person, right?
Well, the only history is the social structure.
Right. That's
what
what
we can
I'm
break
saying.
our own record. Yeah,
You
absolutely.
have to, though. This is why we are in class with Carr every Saturday. This is why
That's why we have narrative,
right?
Nubia. That's
we have
right.
to. We have to, because if we don't, 100 years from now, Eric Monte's name may not, but it will be, because we will not stop talking about him. So I appreciate the walk into history through the passing of somebody to erect the name and the memory of somebody else and many other people. So thank you for this, Dr. Carr.
Oh no, thank you. I mean, this is something we have, and this is something we can do, and it's our responsibility to do. I mean, it's fascinating, isn't it, to hear and to see the fight. Jacob Carruthers called this intellectual warfare. It never ends, because the system, the social structure that we live in, relies on suppressing voices. The voices have to be suppressed. The governments of the world, which all have their problems internally, your people fight even against their own governments. I don't know there's a government on the planet where people don't suffer under the rulers or under the leaders, so to speak, and is some better than others. But if 14 countries on the UN Security Council can say this fighting needs to stop, and then one country raises its hand, as it did yesterday, and say, no, we don't think it should stop, being the United States of America. And not just being the United States of America, but again, one of the things we're learning right now in terms of, we use this Africana States framework in the social structure, who are African people to other people, then, one of the things we can always learn is that we have to hold out the social structure from our governance formation. Because if we don't, we can commingle the two, and that just creates confusion. And it also creates a kind of cognitive dissonance. We see the thing in front of us, it doesn't make sense, but we continue to try to jam those things together. So yesterday at the United Nations, for example, 14 countries, the UN Security Council says, we say that there should be an immediate ceasefire. One country, one of the permanent members of the UN Security Council, one of the 5 permanent members, raises its hand and says, no, 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 it shouldn't. In fact, we do not support, the direct quote was, we do not support calls for for an immediate ceasefire. This would only plant the seeds for the next war. Now, that's utterly absurd. In fact, what you're doing is ensuring that there will be perpetual war as you're wiping out whole families. Palestinian Olympic Commission announced yesterday that dozens of athletes, potential Olympians, won't be competing in anyone's Olympics because they're their ancestors having been killed. Well, they all Hamas too. But the hand that went up was a black hand. Not Ambassador Linda Thompson. No, it was one of her deputies, Robert A. Wood, Bachelor's of Arts from CUNY. He was trained in journalism, Professor Hunter. In fact, a career diplomat, 30 plus years, retired, and then was nominated and appointed, nominated by Joe Biden. Actually was elevated to being an ambassador by Barack Obama in 2014. Nominated in 2013, and confirmed in 2014. Nominated by Joe Biden in 2021 and confirmed in 22. And he's the one, the black man, put his hand up and said that foolishness, even as millions are in the streets around the world saying, stop this. This doesn't set aside the human tragedies and the ongoing conflicts and the violences in Africa and the Caribbean and all over the world, Latin America. But it does say that this moment where the whole world seems to have been arrested by images of a slaughter taking place, a perpetual slaughter taking place. If you read the numbers that have been announced most recently, not by the U.S. propaganda, these newspapers are damn near worthless, but the official account now from the Israeli government of the folks who lost their lives in the murder that was foisted by Hamas on October the 7th is about 1,147. That's been down. That number's been has been reduced from around 1,400. And now reports are coming out that in repelling that attack, the Israeli military killed some of those folk. But that's not equivalent over individuals. That's not what we're talking about, because the numbers in Gaza, West Bank, the numbers there have been impeded because the Gaza health system has collapsed. So the last numbers now are about 17,500. According to the Israelis, about 8,700 Israelis have been injured in this ongoing fight. According to world sources, including Palestinian sources, around 46,500 or so have been wounded in this attack on Gaza, on the Palestinian people. Even though the Western press continues to, and I really do, you have to admire the social structure media. This is yesterday's Financial Times when it says, let me edit that, because when I say love in this context, I'm being completely ironic. I hate it. I detest it, but I embrace it because this is how propaganda works. Yesterday's Financial Times says, for 75 years, Jews and this is the front page. Yesterday's Financial Times. For 75 years, Jews and Palestinians with Israeli citizenship have endured a fragile coexistence. See the passive language, endured a fragile coexistence. But rarely has there been such a stern test as the 8-week Israel-Hamas war. Israel isn't killing Hamas only. Israel is killing whoever the hell gets hit by a bomb or a bullet. You understand? Everybody goes south. Okay, now we're going to bomb the south. What the hell? We're looking for Hamas. And we understand what you say you're doing, but you're killing everybody else. Well, you know, when are you going to stop? We're going to stop when we get rid of Hamas. You're creating the next generation of Hamas. Don't listen to this stooge, Robert A. Wood. I'm sorry, I shouldn't call the brother a stooge. He's worked very hard to get where he is, and I'm sure it's his hand. Although looking at him and listening to him yesterday, it seemed like he liked it. But anyway, you know, I don't know. But it's not an Israel-Hamas war. It's an IDF assault on the West Bank and Gaza. Now, people say not West Bank. Well, I'll get into that in a second. Both Jews and Palestinians, this is what FT said yesterday, both Jews and Palestinians are mourning unprecedented numbers of dead. Okay, you see the language, the normalizing of this both side kind of thing, like the sporting event, like we talked about a month ago, because we're now in month 2 of this war. But the idea of kind of a both side thing, both Jews and Palestinians are mourning unprecedented numbers of dead. Okay, just before that, said the 8-week Israel-Hamas war. Okay, both Jews and Palestinians. Well, should that be both Jews and Hamas? No, it's Jews and Palestinians. Now you got to expand it. But the implicit idea is that the Palestinians are suffering because of what Hamas did, and it is completely justified. And that would make sense, except all the damn countries in the world, over 100 of them in the General Assembly of the UN. That was announced yesterday, but 14 of the 15 on the UN Security Council said this got to stop. The one hand went up, a black hand, the limits of diversity, equity, and inclusion for those who are championing DEI. Understand the limits of DEI. In a minute, we're going to talk about the fact that they after this sister who did everything right her whole life, Claudine Gay, the president of Harvard. And one of the things they're attacking her now, thanks to this subliterate clown in the United States legislature, at least Stefanski, looks like they may sack the president of the University of Pennsylvania first. The board trustees met yesterday. They want her to resign, or they're going to fire her. One of the donors is currently threatening to withdraw a $100 million donation. Money talks. Everything else takes the highway. But Claudine Gay, now the attacks include, well, how did she get to be Harvard's 30th president? Was it diversity, equity, inclusion? No, by your rules, she's better than all of you. Now, I don't have a dog in that fight because I could give less of a damn about the concept, but of the university as the kind of savior of humanity, and certainly not the Ivy League. So this isn't about that. But what it is about is the idea that somehow Black people do not belong. We do not belong. So when you ask the question, who do we belong to? You know, this kind of parses it. So anyway, the idea then that she and the other presidents of the Ivy League did not speak sufficiently when Stefanski led them into a very leading question trap. The calls for the genocide of Israel, is that protected speech? And they were like, it's complicated. No, it's not complicated at all. Anybody calling for somebody to be killed is wrong. The question is it protected speech? But you can't have nuance in a stupid society with a stupid representative who's got an ideological agenda and a battery in her back that was placed there by a number of people who are trying to lead these folks into a trap. And so this sister may, lose her job. She may lose her job. But the point I'm trying to make generally as I finish this paragraph from Financial Times is that the narratives have hardened. So today when we're asking who, do we belong to and how does one belong, we got to understand that narratives shape often who we see ourselves as and who we see each other as. So we'll spend a few moments this morning talking about narratives again, because there has been a passing of a man who lived to be over 100 years old, who sits at the center of American identity, that same identity that is perpetual myth making. And that perpetual myth making isn't confined to the United States of America. It's a world phenomenon. It's why in our Africana studies framework, we have something called movement and memory. We have something called cultural meaning making, because these things are how we know each other, how we decide who belongs and who doesn't belong. So to finish up on this kind of both sidism that FT is writing about and putting in its articles, but also that captures how the kind of social structure Western press has hit upon this rhythm to try to maintain this narrative that has completely disintegrated around the world as the people of the world stand in our common humanity against this purging, this massacre, this indiscriminate murder. It goes on and says, both Jews and Palestinians are mourning unprecedented numbers of dead, and each is enraged by assaults on their people. Now, there's nothing that isn't untrue in that sentence. But again, the underlying idea is somehow this is like equal killing. It's not equal killing. It's not a sporting event. And you know it. Guess what? The world knows it. We go on and it says, finally, even those who consider themselves peace activists have struggled with their emotions in the wake of Hamas's October 7th attack. The Financial Times has spoken to citizens on both sides of the conflict. See, either language matters or it doesn't. Citizens on both sides of the conflict. Are there Palestinian citizens? I guess technically, yes. Even as we look in, for example, East Jerusalem, where Israel-born, Jerusalem-living Palestinian citizens of Israel are under the constant fear of being arrested, under the constant fear of being assaulted and attacked. There's news now out of East Jerusalem that folks have been arrested. Now, there were about in the first 4 days of the ceasefire, Israel released about 200 Palestinian prisoners and arrested about 133, according to the numbers that I saw. So, what are we talking about here? We're talking about a war that Jake Corrales would call intellectual warfare as well. Not just physical killing, it's mental killing. And so we want to put that in the context of Norman Lear just for a little while. And we're not going to mention him a lot, except to use him as the social structure moment and to juxtapose our governance formations and how those things commingle, how they fly apart, how narratives see those Africana studies categories. One of the things that is very strong about these categories is they apply to all human beings, they apply to all human society, they apply to all formations of people. Every group of people is going to have relationships to other people, social structure. We all live in social structures. Every group of people is going to have relationships to themselves, governance formations. Every group of people are going to have ways of knowing that change over time, that persist over time, that kind of emerge and then recede and emerge and recede. Every group of people is going to take advantage of, invent, create, adapt science and technology. Every group of people is going to mark their moments in time with music and dance and art and all type of poetry and all forms of cultural meaning making. And every group of people over time is going to look back over time and ground their vision of the present and future in their memory and the momentum of their memory, movement and memory. So every group has it. But when we start talking about the reason we had to develop those categories, which apply to everyone for Africana studies, is because people get confused. I'm doing Black studies. You're not doing Black studies. You're talking about Black stuff. Those two things are very different. And you're doing it from history and philosophy and literature. You're doing it from sociology and anthropology. You're doing it. Yeah, that's fine. Do it. Do it. But all of those disciplines are white studies because all of them congeal around genealogies that are not ours. So what we're doing in Africana studies is doing what every other group of humans on the planet does, what every individual human being does, but we're doing it from a foundation of Africana. That is our challenge. And the universities tickle around the edges of it. They never wanted Black studies, and that's fine. This ain't about the universities because we jailbroken the universities. The source of our thinking through all these things are our communities. And the death of Norman Lear provides us an excellent opportunity as a common frame of reference to be able to think about how our governance formations have persisted and how our relationships with each other have persisted, how our ways of knowing have persisted, how we have adapted and used science and technology. We didn't invent television, but we damn sure used it with all other forms of mass media. And now we're in what some scholars have called the post-network age. But how much has really changed? Because Norman Lear's view of the world help frame the framework that gives us everything from Andy Cohen's Real Housewives series to Being Mary Jane and the Family Business or all the Tyler Perry. In fact, Tyler Perry had this to say on the passing of Norman Lear. Tyler Perry said, had it not been for Norman Lear, there wouldn't have been a path for me. Now, I'm not mad at him. How could you be mad at Tyler Perry? Because we understand in our governance formation, wisdom conversations we need to have, because there's no such thing as all good guys are all bad guys. Although when Norman Lear created Archie Bunker and All in the Family, and we, we can think about those series. All in the Family runs from 1971 to 79, Maud 1972 to 78, Good Times 74 to 79, The Jeffersons 75 to 85. Interestingly enough, a 10-year period. Do the Poor Whites Remember One Day at a Time? That was a Norman Lear production. Him and his buddy, what's the guy's name? Bud Yorkin, Tandem Productions was their company that they did all this work. But when we think about the way that was paid, the framework that we have, not just in network television, when it comes to people of African descent, has been overly influenced by a man who came to prominence, a man who was born in the 20s, U.S. Army Corps, I think it was, military veteran, talked his way into working for everybody from Danny Thomas to Dick Van Dyke and all them out there on the West Coast. Interestingly enough, lying all the way through. As initial job as a publicist, he got fired because he was making up too many things. Then he went out to the West Coast and told Danny Thomas he was a writer for the New York Times. That's how he got his phone number. And Thomas just happened to say, well, I mean, you're very enterprising. I think I want to hire you. Yeah, but you told a lie to get at me. Norman Lear perfected his trajectory. In fact, it's funny. That old buddy, Adisa Ajamu, who Brother Adesai, psychologist by training, black psychologist, good brother, one of my age mates and comrades, our age mates and comrades. And Adesai used to say he's one of Wade Noble's proteges, Baba Wade Noble's, Mama Vera Noble's out there in the West Coast in the Bay Area. And he used to say, the same person that gets in your car and then you pass the hat to get gas money and he don't put no money in, that's the same person that's going to commit bank fraud later on. Some character flaws are just consistent over time. Norman Lear, since he was an adult, I mean, I have his biography somewhere in storage. I'm sure I would, if I was to go look at it, he might tell himself, he might not. But the point is this, as I keep going on this, the way that Norman Lear framed Black life in the United States of America in the 1970s, in spite of Eric Monty, in spite of Esther Rolle, in spite of John Amos, in spite of Ralph Carter, in spite of them fighting back, pushing back, Janet Du Bois and them pushing back, in spite of that, the way he framed our lives, who we are to other people, seeped into our governance formations. And in many ways, we became what we've always been in this settler crime called the United States of America, what Derek Bell called the involuntary sacrifice. The treatment of the American Negro becomes the barometer by which whiteness allows itself to celebrate itself and how much progress it's made. Yeah, we enslaved all of them. We kidnapped all of them. Yeah, we wiped out as many Native Americans as we could, or indigenous people as we could. But look at us now. Sammy Davis Jr. kissed Archie Bunker on the cheek. Oh, that's very nice. Norman Lear said he wrote Archie Bunker in part based on his own father. And he said, because it proves the point that even in the biggest bigot, the biggest racist, there's something of humanity. Well, that's not untrue. But what's your point? Oh, you're going to use the American Negro to make yourself feel better. So we're going to walk a little bit through this today. And, let me just tie off this piece on the world that we're living in right now, even as we're coming up on the conclusion of the climate summit that's taking place. You have the United Arab Emirates, the Saudis, and all the oil companies are over there now in the so-called Middle East trying to derail any notion of climate change action by the governments of the world, because they understand, and they got this thing called carbon capture now. The scientists know about carbon capture, the idea that you can keep mining and producing these fossil fuels, but the carbon dioxide that they emit, you should be able to cap that and bury it underground. And they're like, okay, well, are you going to do that? Well, yeah, I don't know. We should. In other words, they're stalling because it's based on profit. And so all it's been driven by profit. But let me sit here for a second and think about this. Of course, we know Norman Lear made transition. And as he did, the social structure engages in attempting once again to reinscribe its own movement and memory, reinscribe its meaning and memory. And to do that, it can't do it by itself. You've got to recruit the Negroes who are going to help it. So, it was very interesting to read these articles, and to hear Tyler Perry said, had it not been for Norman Lear, there wouldn't have been a path for me. Well, that's not true. But I understand why you would think that's true, because, that's praising. Kenya Barris, Blackish. Brother Barris. Brother Barris was interviewed. This is an article in the New York Times yesterday or today, where he said, it's like they're asking about Norman Lear. He said, it's like asking someone who played basketball if Michael Jordan influenced them. That's kind of smart-ish. He said he changed the way contemporary storytelling was told in the genre that I was doing it in. Okay. There's a reason why I'm seeing the last 2 seasons of Blackish. I was skeptical from jump. And I'm not talking about the actors. I'm not talking about any of that. I'm talking about the premise. And I'm not Blackish. And perhaps, I can certainly see in the kind of class angst petty bourgeois class angst that is voiced in Blackish, perhaps an echo of the Jeffersons, except Sherman Hemsley and Isabel Sanford, they're not from the same generation as Anthony Anderson and Sister Ross, Tracy Ellen Ross. So the angst may look a little different, but the theme remains the same, the echoing theme, the angst, And yeah, certainly the themes that are confronted in Blackish do echo some of the themes that were confronted in the Jeffersons. So maybe Kenya Barris really isn't too far off in terms of his vision. But anytime I walk on the campus of Temple University and now HBCUs, I saw a young person with a Howard University shirt on that said HBCU-ish. Now, I get Temple. I went to Temple. A lot of people think that Temple is a black school because if you go in the daytime, in the middle of the day, you see all these black people in the student center and walking around, you might think, oh, damn, it's a black. So I get why the black students there might put HBCU-ish on their shirts. But when the black students at the HBCU put HBCU-ish on their shirts, I'm saying this is the insidious nature of popular culture, mass mediation. This is how things penetrate. And now, as to quote Jesse Fawcett from the first quarter of the 20th century, there is confusion. There is confusion. And, I don't lay that at the feet of Norman Lear. Norman Lear worked and was very successful in the world he inherited. However, when it comes to the American Negro and the momentum of memory, here, the New York Times and all the mass media, CNN, all these people broadcast, let's go find these Negroes who have outsized influence in the post-network age of mass mediation, who have found their way as cultural meaning makers into the science and technology of mass broadcast, mass mediation, mass media, and ask them to reinscribe for our social structure the value of this man, Norman Lear. Now, are they going to mention Eric Monte? Maybe in passing, and even if they did, it ain't gonna make it into the article. So I'm continue to read this, and Jimmy Walker, they interviewed, because they got to interview JJ. Jimmy Walker said this week that he told Norman Lear. Now, mind you, nobody knew how old Jimmy Walker was at the time. In an article I'm going to go through in a minute that I think is one that everyone should read, that September 1975 article, Ebony Magazine, written by a brother named Louis Robinson. We're going to talk about that brother as well. Over 30 years, he worked for Ebony, wrote many cover stories. We're going to talk about him in a minute as well. But in that article, this is 1975, after Good Times had been on for a year, and the cast was fighting Norman Lear. This is, of course, after he jacked Eric Monte. But Jimmy Walker's interviewed, and then what Robinson says is nobody really knows. Is he 25, 26, 27, 28, 29, 30, somewhere between 25 and 30, it's not clear. But here's Jimmy Walker now as an old man. He's in his 70s now. This is what Jimmy Walker said this week about Norman Lear. He said, when Norman Lear was telling me they wanted to put some social stuff in on JJ, now mind you, the reason they're doing that is because the cast, particularly Esther Rolle and John Amos, are pushing back against him. This is what Jimmy Walker said. He told Norman Lear. He said, Norman, if you want to deliver a message, go work for Western Union. I'm here to work. I'm here to have fun, baby. I'm here to do comedy. Now, at the time, 4 of the 5 shows on network television that had Black characters featured prominently were comedies. The 5th was like Get Christy Love, and the Black person that was in it was always doing comic relief. So it's minstrelsy, it's Amos and Andy, it's for every Julia there's a dozen other ones. For every attempt by Hattie McDaniel to get something on the air like Beulah, you still got to tell a few jokes. That's why Eric Montre is like that Yassa Ball stuff. That's what y'all like. Eric Montre said Norman Lear was a racist, but he didn't think he was. And of course, in many ways, particularly when you think about somebody like Derek Bell writing about this, or any number of people, or what am I saying, Derek Bell, Martin Luther King. Hey, Nubia, remember we read page by page, where do we go from here, chaos or community? And Martin Luther King wrote that, in many ways, the worst racist is the white liberal, because they don't think they're racist. Now, I'm not coming for Norman Lear. I don't have to. He's standing right here. What I am doing, however, is using the Africana studies framework to separate. Yeah, I said it, separate. It's artificial in real life because we all live together, but it's absolutely valid conceptually, because this is what disciplines do. They allow you to see the real world in ways that allow you to make a better world after you've distinguished out the commingling, because right now there is confusion. And Norman Lear made a powerful arc of life on fomenting confusion, on creating something called an American identity that people are now celebrating. And you cherry pick and get a few Negroes to come in. Of course, you get Jimmy Walker, who at the time he was cast as JJ, was a stand-up comedian, a working stand-up comedian. So of course it was no problem. Who said in the article I'm gonna mention now, Louis Robinson's 1975 article, September 1975 article, he had no relationship outside of the set with any of the other members of the cast. Any of the other members of the cast. So now you come back in 2023, December 2023, and interview him about Norman Lear, and you put in his mouth the words he told Norman Lear as a 20-something. He wasn't there to do social messages. You want to send a message, you go to Western Union. Now, has he learned something since then? Well, I'm not sure. I'll be seeing him with Ann Coulter from John Tate. But they do say, well, later on he grew to appreciate that. Well, he didn't grow to appreciate it. He was force-fed by Esther Rolle, and he was force-fed by John Amos. John Amos, who was the last person to sign his contract in the first, I think this year 1 or year 2, season 2 of Good Times, because, and they said, and what Louis Robinson reports is it wasn't about money. It was about the portrayal of his character. So what did they do? And he said, and Esther Rolle was like, they can't do that to me about these Black characters. They could do it. In fact, let me just get to Louis Robinson. Louis Robinson, as I said, I encourage everybody to look this up, because again, who do we belong to? Who do we belong to is the question we're raising this morning in the wake of this passing and its common frame of reference, which is why any teacher in any valence, from the youngest child to the oldest human being, will tell you that teachable moments shouldn't be passed up if we have the capacity to learn from them. And so, Norman Lear passed. People know who that is. Eric Monte says, this man stole from me. Many people didn't know who that is. Now you do. And in the conversation, we can use this as a lens through which to use our Africana studies framework to raise all kinds of issues of the human condition. So Louis Robinson worked for Ebony magazine. He was born around 1926. He made transition in 2015. Lived a long life, just short of his 90th birthday. Louis Robinson graduated from Lincoln University in Missouri. That's right, the HBCU west of the Mississippi. Beautiful school, incredible, legacy, continues to this day. Louis Robinson was a journalist. In fact, it was the only historically Black college in the country at the time that had a degree granting program in journalism. He was a journalist, this man, Louis Robinson. And Louis Robinson worked for Ebony magazine for over 30 years. In fact, before he worked for for Ebony magazine, he started a newspaper in Texas, Tyler, Texas. Y'all know about the Tyler Rose, the great, what's the brother's name? Number 34 for the Houston Oilers, Earl Campbell. Earl Campbell still walks the earth, the Tyler Rose. But anyway, Louis Robinson started a little newspaper called the Tyler Tribune. It was so successful, after a couple of years, it was purchased and rebranded in Dallas as the Dallas Morning Star. He then got hired eventually by Mr. Johnson at Johnson Publications, and he wrote for Ebony for over 30 years, did a lot of features. His beat was entertainment. So he did sports, he did mostly film, television, and he wrote this feature article, cover article. And those of you who are old enough to remember those covers, those Ebony magazine covers, this is when Ebony was writing hardcore work, and just, again, that age has passed for all mass media publications. Ain't none of them, every one of them, including Essence and Ebony, are shadows of their former selves, because our literacy, it isn't them, it's us. Our literacy is a shadow of its former self. We don't read like we used to, but you remember those covers. You remember the cover with the whole cast of Good Times on the cover of Ebony magazine. That was the September 1975 cover, and the headline was "Bad Times on the Good Times set." And this is what Louis Robinson writes at the beginning of that article. He says, many Good Times performers feel like they're responsible for, quote, cleaning up that stereotypical image of Blacks that has persisted in television and film for decades. So Robinson is saying they're on the set, they're glad to be working, but they are pushing back. Esther Rolle. In fact, let me pause here and integrate these other Norman Lear vehicles, because All in the Family was first, 1971. And let's take a minute through the songs. Prof, it was so funny, before we came on live, you were, humming and singing, which I love to hear your voice. You got a wonderful voice, y'all. Y'all know, everybody. We know what it is. Talk, singing those songs, because those theme songs. Norman Lear didn't write those theme songs for his vehicles. In fact, some of them were written by Black people, others were not. Well, that first theme song from All in the Family, two white writers, right? But they frame the social structure and the movement and memory in that social structure of the racists of the 1970s. Carol O'Connor, Gene Stapleton sitting at the piano. Boy, the way Glenn Miller played songs that made the hit parade. Some of y'all know about that, Mitch Miller. Oh, guys like us, we had it made. Those were the days. Think of it as a MAGA theme from 1971. And of course, how could you got to attack everybody. And you knew who you were then. That's Gene Stapleton. Carol O'Connor comes back in. Boys were boys and men were men. Hardly subtle. Mister, we could use a man like Herbert Hoover again. Didn't need no welfare state. Everybody pulled his weight. Hardly subtle. G.R.O. LaSalle ran great. Those were the days. Okay, there's Carol O'Connor framing it. You drop a couple of people in. You heard Eric Montre come in. He wrote one episode of All in the Family, because he's going to introduce those characters called the Jeffersons, the next door neighbors. People might not know that there was a show that Norman Lear tried to mount, got on the air back in the 90s, right? 1993 and 1994, called 704 Hauser. Any of y'all remember that? I'm traveling. Actually, I'm here. Ironically, who do we belong to? Because this is around the time of year that we have the annual retreat for the Black Family Summit. The Black Family Summit. I'm here in Baltimore. Shout out to all of our people. Sister Zakia, who is the convener of the Black Family Summit, she took over for Zakia Newland. She took over for Baba Leonard Dunstan, who is here, who is convener emeritus, and our resident Jolly. A lot of elders here, a lot of Black organizations, and we sit in council for 3 days to really delve deep into the questions that really kind of face us as a people. And so I'm here for the Black Family Summit. So I'm not, typically when I'm traveling, as we move into 2024 and increase our capacity, I'm not able to pull up all the screens so I can see in the Nubia chat and see in the YouTube side as people. I'm sure some people remember 704 Hauser, and you may have even put it in the chat. I hope you did. I'll go back and review. But this 704 Hauser vehicle that Norman Lear created and got on the air in 1994. See, white people are allowed to be failures once you get to a certain level of success. You just put stuff. It didn't last but a few weeks, but the premise was it was a Black family that had moved into Archie Bunker's house. Well, 20 years before, of course, the Black family didn't live in his house. They lived next door, the Jeffersons. And so you see Eric Monte, of course, introducing those characters at the behest of his co-writer, Mike Evans, who had played, of course, the son who disappears. But again, Norman Lear and white privilege, and I'm not a racist, and his attitude toward Black men and Black women. Because y'all know me, those of you who know me know that community is the anchor of our human existence. And while there are gender dimensions to that, I'm not an intersectional. Kind of understand the value of intersectionality. And by the way, shout out to the people at Advanced Placement who have just released the next iteration of the AP African American Studies course. It still isn't Africana Studies the way I would define it, because we've been doing that for 3.5 years in a very broad global sense here, and of course growing by leaps and bounds, week after week, month after month, now year after year in Nubia and Knarrative. But it is a valuable course for introducing young people to the study of African people. It is very valuable, and intersectionality has been now repositioned to a more prominent role in the 4th unit of that course. This certainly comes after the intellectual wars about what is in the course. By the way, everything in the course now was in the course before. It just been repositioned. Some things have been elevated to prominence. So I just wanted to mention that. But again, community is at the center of our thing. So the conceptual tools are important, but ultimately we live in the world. And so in 1971, you see All in the Family come in, because that's all in the white family. but the Negroes live in the United States. You got to deal with race. And so, well, you don't have to deal with race, but this ain't the 50s. You know, this isn't the 40s or 30s where you can be black on the radio with white actors and then come on TV. Now you need black actors. And so people like hearing Louis Gates say, I finally remember Amos and Andy. And plus they had all black actors. We understand, Skip. I understand why. You know, you understand why you would do that. But ultimately, this is the 70s. And as we know, what happens in mass mediated entertainment, network broadcast entertainment in the United States, Great Britain too, but the United States being the cultural polyglot and settler colony with all these people who you brought and tried to kill and then tried to kill these other people, but they survived and now you all got to live together. What you happen is you're having contestation over memories. So in broadcast television, what we've seen is that a generation will go back to the previous generation and keep trying to create movement and memory. So in the 70s is when we get Happy Days, Laverne and Shirley, we get All in the Family, all those. And then in the 80s, we get those black shows, 227 and all them, you know, Amen and all those. And then in the 90s, we see as network television continues to persist, the black shows that emerge, but you also see the emergence of something like Fox. And you see the kind of irreverence. But what they will do is go back to the previous generation and mine it for movement and memory, for that kind of movement and memory. How do we remember the 50s? But it's in the 70s. So you bring them forward. Those were the days. He's going back to the 40s. Boy, the way Glenn Miller played. My daddy played Glenn Miller all the time in his house, but that's the 1940s, right? Little Brown Jug, Pennsylvania 65000, all those tunes, you know, Mitch Miller's Hit Parade, right? You know, all these things. They're going back to the 50s, the 40s and 50s in the 70s. Well, here come this black family. They got something to say about it, right? So what happens? Of course, Monterey introduces the Jeffersons and they get a theme song. The Jeffersons come online in 1975. But the year after All in the Family, we'll get to the Jeffersons, the year after All in the Family comes Maude. Now, you know, the best music was and is black music. So who do they get to write and perform the theme for Maude? Maude is the white woman, Archie Bunker's cousin. Oh, really? Yeah, that's what Norman Lear said. Maude is Archie Bunker's cousin. She's going to be as far on the quote unquote left as Archie Bunker is on the right. However, this is a social structure framework. Even to this day, we talk about left and right. What are you talking about? We need to have some distance from this to understand that politics, when you commingle it, there is confusion. That's why they say something like, well, black people are socially liberal, but culturally conservative. Okay, you're still trying to jam us into your frameworks. I understand sometimes, in fact, there's great overlap, but we need a conceptual framework where we can kind of distinguish ourselves for a minute so we can talk about the ranges of opinion in our community, because it still matters that our community is something that is constantly under assault. We don't belong to you. I know you would like to think we do, but we don't. And you prove it every day when you assault us based on race. Based on race. So at any rate, they get Donny Hathaway. Donny Hathaway writes the theme for Maude, this white woman, proto-feminist, I suppose you would call her. We talked about Sandra Day O'Connor last week. And what is she doing? She's pushing the envelope in the 1970s. The two-episode sequence where she terminated a pregnancy, had an abortion. This was shocking in the 1970s. Maude, as I said, runs from 72 to 78. And Donny Hathaway every night with that piano. Bum, 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 bum. Lady Godiva was a freedom rider. She didn't care if the whole world looked naked. Joan of Arc with the Lord to guide her. She was a sister who really cooked. No black woman. Lady Bonner was the first bar burner. Ain't you glad she showed up? Now the sisters, oh yeah. And when the country was falling apart, Betsy Ross got it all sold up. This soulful man singing this song ain't mentioned nothing about Catherine Elon, the sister who stitched together the Haitian flag, because he ain't Haitian. He's an African in the United States. So Betsy Ross got it all sold up. And then there's Maude, and then there's Maude, sister singing in the back. Okay, so you got the black song in, and you get the black woman coming in the kitchen. And that's Esther Rolle. Esther Rolle was trained in theater, professionally trained artist, just like Donny Hathaway was trained. Although he had to fight the petty bourgeois Negroes, that him and Richard Smallwood and all them. Shout out to Richard Smallwood, just had a birthday and they had a celebration. I thought about you, Baba J. Jeremy Wright. Some people will accuse Jeremiah Wright of having a theme song. As Bernie Casey said, every good hero should have one. Total Praise by Richard Smallwood. But Richard Smallwood, when he was at Howard, along with Donny Hathaway and them, Roberta Flack, they had to fight. They had to fight Howard because they wouldn't let them play gospel music on the pianos in fine arts. Of course, a lot has changed since then. It was around the time Felicia and Debbie Ayers were in the fine arts department. So that pushback is why we had the celebration we had at Howard last Sunday, a brilliant curation of cultural meaning making, Africana cultural meaning making at chapel. It was a wonderful moment, but this ain't then. So Donny Hathaway's recruited to sing the theme for Maud. And that's about as black as it gets, as Florida Evans is the other pillar of blackness. And she, like Donny Hathaway and a lot of those folks who found their way onto television, not Jimmy Walker. Jimmy Walker, after all, was a comedian. And he said, I'm not here to be funny. You want to send a message. Okay, but Esther Rolle's different. Esther Rolle is a theater-trained woman, a dance-trained woman. You see some of the speeches of Malcolm X on 125th Street, and you see some of the cultural events that took place. They would have dancers and drumming and singing. And you see Esther Rolle, you look at Eyes on the Prize, the second episode, second series where they talk about Malcolm, the episode on Malcolm, the installment on Malcolm. They say episode again in this language. But you see Esther Rolle very quickly doing a dance. And so it's very, wait, did I lose my volume, Prof? Can you hear me?
Yeah, I can hear you, but
okay, very good.
Yeah, your internet is a little sketchy though. Sometimes.
Is it?
A little bit, but it's okay. We will plow through.
We'll plow through it. Okay, I don't want to. Okay, that's why I was worried a little bit about that internet. I always worry about that when I'm out mobile. So yeah, but Esther Rolle comes in, and Esther Rolle is very interesting. In the article Louis Robinson wrote, this is what Esther Rolle said about her role on Maud and how it differed from the role on Good Times. Social structure. Here's the social structure comment she says. She says, what I do in my madam's house is a facade. Ooh, social structure. Who are Africans to other people? Then she gives the governance line to Louis Robinson. And she says, what I do at home is me. What I do at my madam's house is a facade. What I do at home is me. Zona Hurston used to write about that. I got one mind for them to see. I got another mind for me to see. In other words, this is why we had to have an Africana Studies framework. Now, she didn't have an Africana Studies framework in the 1970s when she's giving this interview to Louis Robinson. However, she had Africana. See, the thing that really is a little off-putting to some folk about academics, but it shouldn't be too much because most people don't pay attention to any academics, and that's the way it should be, quite frankly, is that they invent frameworks and then say that this is the thing that reveals everything. No, we've had good sense for a long time. That's why the Africana Studies framework to me is so very important, because what we're reinforcing is this is about us, and we are the authorities. You don't get trained in being us. In fact, Janet Du Bois said this when they were fighting Norman Lear over the portrayal of Black people on Good Times. She said, I got these white writers writing about me as a Black woman. I'm a Black woman. Y'all can't tell me how to be a Black woman. Esther Rolle said this to Norman Lear. She said, we're going to argue about some things, and ultimately I'm going to win when it comes to Black women because I've been Black the longest. This is one thing I love about Esther Rolle. Esther Rolle could put shade. You know how Black people could put shade on you. She said, I've been Black the longest. She didn't say, I'm Black and you're not. What is she implying by saying it that way? Is she implying that you Black to these white people? In fact, I'm sure you probably like Ken Burns. You think you're an honorary Negro. I never forget when Howard University gave Ken Burns an honorary degree. We sitting there at graduation, and he stands up and he looks out at the crowd and he says, today I feel like I'm among my people. Yeah, because you're the Blackest one of all. You're Blacker than me. I've been Black my whole life because you invented whiteness and then used me as the foil to reinforce whiteness, which means you invented Blackness too. Blackness is a figment of your imagination, whatever. And then we took it and tried to make it into something else. But, ultimately we're going to get rid of that too. But, when you've created whiteness as the framework, then your Blackness becomes the authoritative Blackness. And Esther Rolle said, I've been Black the longest, meaning what? I got a governance Blackness. But at any rate, she then gets her show. Okay, they spin it off. Now, Eric Montreal, this is a guy who created Cooley High, as we said, Good Times, the Jefferson's then Good Times. Well, actually, no, let me think. Good Times comes on the air, first, 74. to 79. The Jeffersons comes right after that. Jefferson's comes on in 75. Because remember what he said about how Norman Lear pitched and got Good Times, got the Jeffersons. You know, he dusts off what this brother did after writing that one episode for All in the Family. So when you know, as you read the article in Ebony, they walk through it. And she says, you know, I'm not taking this without having a partner. I want a husband. It need to be a black family. This is not a Norman Lear convention. And you heard what Montre said about his problem with black men. He had a problem with black women too, but the problem was different. And when you're grappling with these folk, it's how should I put this? Oh well, we'll get to that in a minute. So here now, you're on the verge, and you've birthed a new show in network television, Good Times. Janet Du Bois writes the theme for Good Times. Janet Du Bois, who ends up playing Willona, the neighbor. Janet Du Bois, who was an actress, a producer, a director, had done all this work, and a songwriter. She writes the theme for Good Times without seeing the show or none of it, not even knowing any treatment. So actually, no. Yeah, that's true. Yeah. I'm tripping.
No, she did it for the Jeffersons.
She wrote the Jeffersons. She wrote the Jeffersons, right? The two white
Moving
dudes
on
wrote Good Times. That's right. Moving on up. That's right. She wrote the theme for the. That's right. Thank you, Prof. She wrote the themes for the Jeffersons without seeing the show. The two white boys write Good Times, and of course, I mean, I would of course correct it in my head because you can tell the white boys wrote it because it's that stereotype. Good times, anytime you need a payment. Anytime you need a friend, got that gospel, you know. Anytime you're out from under, not getting hassled, not getting hustled. Hassle and hustle. I'm sure they just clapped themselves on the back and went and had a drink after they got that alliteration. You know, keeping your head above water. Got a little gospel piano, a little blues, a little note in there. Making a way when you can. Black life is struggle. Temporary layoffs, good times, the juxtaposition, right? You know, we likes it. Yes, sir. Easy credit ripoffs, good times. No wonder Tyler Perry said he paid the role for me. It sounds just like every damn sitcom Tyler Perry has ever done. Meet the Browns, taste the Browns, wear the Browns, be the Browns, all of that. And then scratching and surviving, hanging and a jiving. Was that what they mean? Yes, what the songwriter said. That's the lyric. Hanging and a jiving. Hanging and a jiving. Really? Is that what we doing? But at the end of the
I thought it was hanging in the job line. You said
well, they clarified it. Those two songwriters were approached about that and said in the first season they said that was what it was. But then they came back and said hanging and a jiving is what they meant the line to be. So I mean, you know, either way, it's bad. You know what I'm saying? But it's very interesting because, as my mom would say, black people say, ways of knowing, even a broke clock is right twice a day. When you get to the credits at the end of the episodes, just looking out of the window, watching the asphalt grow. That's a powerful moment because you think about that. Those housing projects, Ida Wells, Cabrini Green in Chicago, thinking how it all looks handed down. And here you go again, keeping your head. Esther Rolle, there's a photograph. I don't know, was Minetta Slett? I need to check the photo credits, but everybody can check it. The September 1975 issue of Ebony magazine. There is a photograph of Esther Rolle in a white head wrap and an African dress, looking like the same dancer she was in the 50s when Malcolm was speaking on 125th Street in front of Mr. Michaud's bookstore. There's a photograph of her surrounded by children in the front of the Cabrini Green projects because Esther Rolle would go over there and visit with the children who lived in those housing projects and with the families. Because for Esther Rolle, the importance of her being on television was to be an inspiration, to be instructive, and she would not take a role that would demean her because, again, as this brother said when he opened, Louis Robinson, he said these actors thought that their job was to cleanse the stained image of blacks. So when you see that photograph, you realize, Norman Lear gonna keep her up in the projects, her and her family, which he had she had to force feed him her husband. But when she wasn't at work, she did. And John Amos, white women marrying white women. Okay, you made your personal choice, but life is complicated. He was the head of the United Negro College Fund. Did a lot of fundraising in Southern California while he was out there in television. What is it, Studio City, Hollywood? He's out there leading the movement in the UNCF to raise money for Black people. There's a picture of him in the magazine article with Mervyn Donnelly, Congressman Donnelly, the Black congressman, one of the Black congressmen in Southern California. So you see them doing this work. It's very interesting. Now, what Louis Robinson gets into in this article is, he says, as this series unfolded after the first year, the second year, he says, in the second year, the role of Michael, that's Ralph Carter, who still walks the earth, Brother Ralph Carter. Last time I saw him was at John Henry Clark's, the dedication of John Henry Clark Reading Room, when we talked about that. Michael Carter has been on the front lines in Harlem all the time with those Black New Yorkers, First World, the study group, which eventually became part of the Association for the Study of Classical African Civilizations. All of them, Mama Kepa Neptis, Baba Bill Jones, that whole crew. Shout out to love to all of those ancestors and all the people who continue that work. Ralph Carter was there and went to school with, among others, Wesley Snipes, Larry Fishburne. First time that I saw Wesley Snipes and Lawrence Fishburne in person was, well, Ralph Carter and Lawrence Fishburne, because Wesley Snipes couldn't come to the debut of the documentary he made on John Henry Clark, because he was off shooting one of the Blade sequels. And when we all went to New York to the town hall for the debut of the film, Ralph Carter and Lawrence Fishburne came out because they were all friends and they were all knowing each other for years. And it was Ralph Carter who they credited with giving the consciousness, putting the consciousness up under them. The consciousness that would have Wesley Snipes do something, for example, like buy the credits or acquire the rights to make Black Panther, to make Blade in them. Of course, he never got to make Black Panther, but the point is that Ralph Carter is at the center of that. But in the article, what Louis Robinson talks about is that the 14-year-old in the show, his role was suddenly diminished over episodes and then into the next season. And the role of the clown was enhanced. Jimmy Walker's was enlarged. And then Esther Rolle says in the article, they couldn't do that to me. They knew that wouldn't fly with me. So what do? They go to the stand-up comedian and they take it out on the young boy. They couldn't do that to me. And then they go to Jimmy Walker. And Jimmy Walker says, as I said before, I don't think anybody 20 years from now will remember what I said, how stupid that was. But you in 1975, you think ain't nobody gonna remember this. He says, I don't want to be a follower or a leader. That's what he says. Remind me of another man who should have turned this down, but how could he turn it down? Because ego is a hell of a drug, not unlike cocaine. Shout out to Dave Chappelle and Rick James, and Charlie Murphy. But a man who should have turned it down when they came to him and said, son or sir, son in my mind, sir out my mouth, because I don't want you to beat me up because you sit 270 pounds. Charles Barkley, we want you to sit on this couch next to Gayle King and interview the United States Secretary of State Anthony Blinken on the Israel conflict. And he didn't say, you out your damn mind. I talk about basketball with Shaq and Ernie and Kenny. And no, what he said was, okay, so you see him there struggling to ask about the Israel conflict with the Secretary of State. This is the same man who said a generation ago, I am not a role model. In other words, it's not enough to tell people you still took the job. And when Jimmy Walker, echoing what would become Charles Barkley's famous line a generation later, I'm not a role model, says, I don't want to be a follower. I don't want to be a leader. Jimmy Walker says, I want to be a doer. Dude, you sound like Bootney Farnsworth. Well, actually, you are Bootney Farnsworth, so okay. Unfortunately, you and Charles Barkley couldn't meet in the middle of a ring like let's do it again and knock each other out, because there's no Bill Cosby or Sidney Poitier to hypnotize you. Oh, by the way, Sidney Poitier was one of the first interviewees from Louis Robinson, who started writing about Sidney Poitier around 1955. In fact, upon his passing, Sidney Poitier said, this man was one of our best in terms of chronicling our art, our life, and our culture. And it's all in the pages of Ebony magazine, cover story after cover story after cover story. So you see this battle going on. Now, John Amos, Louis Robinson says, John Amos, he writes in there that he was the last one to sign his contract because he didn't like how we were being portrayed. This is Good Times, right? That's Good Times, 1974 to 1979. And eventually, of course, what do? Because the actors are pushing back. Robinson chronicles this. What happens? Well, they said, we don't like the fact that Jimmy Walker ain't got no job. Jimmy Walker is like, when I'm not on set, I don't see these people that I'm acting with. Now, every last one of them, including his age mate, So I'm thinking about what's the sister that played Thelma? Oh, what's her name?
Bernadette Stannis.
Bernadette Stannis. Yes, thank you. Bernadette Stannis, who, during this age of unenlightened black male fantasy, along with Pam Grier, was on every barbershop wall in the United States of America, from being the jet centerfold of the week. But Bernadette Stannis is like, I'm the only teenage black girl on television with a consistent role. I want more. I can be a straight man to Jimmy Walker, but I need and want more. So eventually, of course, you see her get married, you see engagement, her. But those changes on Good Times weren't Norman Lear. Now, of course, cultural meaning making and movement and memory in the social structure is going to rewrite this, talk about how progressive he was. No, these are black actors pushing back. And I'm going to wind this up in a second. They are across all of Norman Lear's project, because we even got to the one. We ain't got the Sanford and Son. Oh, see, you can get away with that with a 14-year-old and a stand-up comedian you can pull off and made famous, who, by the way, while John Amos is out there raising money with UNCF, and Esther Rolle got all these culture projects going on and visiting people. Jimmy Walker is on the stand-up circuit when he's not online, and he sold 100,000 copies of his album Dynamite during the time, and Louis Robinson writing about that too, and got these T-shirts. Remember them tight ass T-shirts with his face on them, and the chicken hat that he had when he was working. So they said, no, this got to change. So what do? They put him in art school. That ain't no Norman Lear invention. That's the black cast saying, you got the little boy who's a genius and doing all this academic work, and you make him the militant, and you got the older brother who ain't got no job, want to be an artist, but it's somebody. Ernie Barnes' paintings are well positioned, is beautiful, but at the same time, what is it? They put him in art school, because all that's black people pushing back. Now, of course, the Jeffersons come, and that's when Janet Du Bois, who hadn't seen the show, who also complains in Good Times, because she says, yeah, I get the sass and all this, but I've been a black woman my whole life. I don't like these white writers telling me I'm just going to bust in. They're constantly fighting Norman Lear and his writer's room. Understand? The Jeffersons come 1975. And of course, well, I'm moving on up. So now you got the class issue emerge, because Jefferson and them moved away from Archie Bunker. They in a deluxe apartment in the sky. Fish don't burn in the kitchen. Beanies don't burn on the grill. Took a lot of trying just to get up that hill. Now we're up in the big leagues, getting our turn at bat. Okay, beautiful. And you see that struggle. Now they're gonna be on there fighting, because guess what? Guess what? These ain't kids. They're trained actors. If they're comedians, they are comedians from vaudeville, burlesque, and the black circuit, the governance formation. The social structure is not what informed them. It's the cultural meaning making of Africana. So when you put Sanford and Son on the air, so notice Sanford and Son is the one of them shows that didn't have no lyrics. Yeah, because see, that's Quincy Jones. And Quincy Jones composes The Street Beater. And the cast there, that's an ensemble cast of black comedians. Here come Red Fox. Here come the Wanda Page. I mean, I had to go down and do some drilling down to see, but I want to see who wrote or what's the provenance of, remember when Bubba was like, I want my daddy records. See, Norman Lear write that. I want my daddy records. Like, you see that intervention. But see, LaWanda Page in Sanford and Son, Isabel Sanford in the Jeffersons, Esther Rolle in Good Times, they ain't no kids. Even the young girl is like, yeah, Bernadette Stannis, I need more to do. But these sisters is like, nah, we ain't, and John Amos, you can't control John Amos, but Eric Monte done told you about Norman Lear and the American male. So what do they do on Good Times? Well, they say that John Amos is going back to school too, and he finds a job in Alaska. Whoa, what just happened? Oh, this thing gotta go. You got to go. And here we are, Jimmy Walker said, anybody gonna remember what I said 20 years from now? Well, here we are almost 50 years from now, and if don't nobody know nothing about Good Times, they never seen no episode, they know about that punch bowl and damn James. Norman Lear, yeah, left an indelible stamp on the soul of Black people, the one that we got to scrub out because that generation of actors damn near tried, in the words of Louis Robinson, to cleanse the stain and image of Blacks. And now, if Norman Lear is gone, that image persists. Shout out to Andy Cohen, because reality TV emerges in that post-network era. And so, we don't need script writers. In a minute with AI, we ain't gonna need none of it. All we gotta do is mind the minstrelsy and keep this minstrelsy going and keep reinforcing this foolishness. And now, in the post-broadcast era at all, while we're here week after week, while we're here every day in Nubia and Narrative, while Karen Hunter, while Prof Hunter is there every day in Sirius, well, guess what? A billion flowers have bloomed. Now y'all talking about some cat named Charleston White, and he arguing with Umar Jabba. Minstrelsy. Okay, speak your speech. And now the confusion, because there is confusion. But Norman Lear represents an impulse that has all of that confusion retreat to the same meaning, whether it be the Breakfast Club, whether it be Cameron and Mace, whether it be, I don't know, anybody. You think Gilbert Arenas and all the sports podcasts, whether it be all the
Shannon Sharp.
Shannon Sharp, Unc, Unc, and man, come on now. Oh my God, I saw a clip of that the other day. Now he's trending. Why? Because he's on there with Chad Johnson. My God, Chad 85 or whatever he done renamed himself, and talking about this boy said I was stripping for the BBWs, and then here come Unc talking about, yeah, you ain't a lady if you ain't 180. Is that what you told your non-Black wife, a husband, girlfriend, whatever? The point is this. Minstrelsy. Norman Lear is not responsible. He just the latest iteration of the minstrelsy that those Black actors and actresses was trying to fight against and get overwhelmed, because we commingle the social structure, who we are to other people, with the governance formation, who we are to each other. Who do we belong to? The social structure keeps telling you, you are the foil, you're the comic relief, you're the thing to be scared of and hated at the same time, and loved secretly or not so secretly at the same time, which is why on the Jeffersons. Come on, Lenny Kravitz. You mad because Black people, Michael Harriot bodied Lenny Kravitz, so we ain't got to even talk about that in the griot. So Mike took care of it, and Mike writes about Eric Montre as well. So, Lenny Kravitz, man, Black people don't, feature me prominently, don't give me the love. Come on, man, I love your music, man. You're a good brother, but let's be very clear. Your mama, who's a Howard University graduate, Roxy Roker, and the white man who she was married to on the Jeffersons, that's the first interracial kiss. And guess what? It's progress in Norman Lear's world. Now, was that a secret to Black people? Black people, like every other human being, been crossing all kind of barriers for years. But guess what? That's a big thing. You went from Sammy Davis Jr. kissing Archie Bunker on the cheek. And by the way, the reports are that Sammy Davis Jr. would have his taping and filming schedule, if he's on a movie set or something, arranged so he could watch all in the family. Well, you went from that to Roxy Roker kissing the dude who played, I think it was Franklin Culver, played her husband on the Jeffersons. And that's interracial, right? Okay. And in her real life, she did that too. And, here's Lenny Kravitz complaining. But guess what? That's the world that the man who had your mom employed made, or at least continued to make. The stereotypes are there. Don't be mad, because as Mike said in his article, where are the Black news media outlets that you gave interviews to, like Vanity Fair? Where are the Black publicists? Where are the Black? Don't be mad now, Lenny. Don't be mad, because, you was married to Lisa Bonet. I had a wonderful daughter, heard things with Lisa Bonet, who emerges in the moment of the Cosby Show. People wanted to crucify Felicia Rashad for, defending Bill Cosby. But you know what? Let's think about what they were doing together in the 80s and early 90s that birthed a different world. I mean, Bill Cosby during this period is one of those people who is not only an actor, he's trying to acquire the clout to push back too, and it gets to be a complicated story. But this ain't no story we gonna have in a conversation with social structure scholars. Well, I don't care what you think. I don't care what you think after we've had a thorough argument, debate, fallen out, made up, hugged it out, and continue. Now, what was you saying? Why? Because what you're not going to do is come in here and bring that confusion. There is confusion, and you're not going to bring it out in the death of Norman Lear by reinforcing this social structure cultural meaning making and movement and memory. We're not going to do it. So let me kind of wind this up. So thinking about in the wake of the 70s and these struggles that we fought to represent ourselves, to represent ourselves, struggles we fought to find in our governance formations some form of cultural meaning making that we could relate to, which is why years after all those shows went off the air, and I should mention that near the end of his life, Norman Lear, among the projects he was trying to get done or begin or undertake was an animated version of Good Times. Really, the last Emmy award he won. Remember that? What was it, Prof? Was it Jimmy Kimmel that redid all those shows with like like Jamie Foxx played George Jefferson?
Jimmy Fallon, and I think
Fallon. It was Fallon.
Yeah, Steph Curry actually did the Good Times one. Steph Curry, the basketball phenom, also produced the Good Times one.
Yes. Well, I mean, Jimmy Fallon, shout out to Jimmy Fallon, because when I think of Jimmy Fallon, I think of Norman Lear. But at any rate, what did Martin Luther King say? But I ain't mad at him. I mean, after all, you can only be who you can be, right? And that's not true. You can always be something else if you want to be. At any rate.
Before you wind down, I have a question.
Yeah. Oh, no, please.
What is our responsibility, as you bring up the minstrelsy of the housewives, again, directed in the same vein, as you bring up all of these very high trending iterations of commentary, even, Charles and Gayle King talking to Anthony Blinken. I had this conversation with Roy Wood yesterday. I was like, are they equipped to ask the questions that we need answered? Right. Either one of them.
Mm-hmm.
One's a teleprompter reader, and the other is a former basketball player who's very entertaining. I love him.
Yeah.
I love him on talking about different things, and he's like a broken clock. When he says things, is spot on. But
question.
But are they equipped to ask the questions that will get us the answers that we need? But also, like, what's our responsibility? Because our watching of these things,
what is our responsibility?
Right? It brings the money, and it tells the world this is what is the algorithm. We feed the algorithm, whether it's on YouTube or on television. What's our responsibility, and how do we discipline ourselves to create what we want to live in? How do we? Because it's up to us. We determine what's successful, what's powerful, who's in office. It's our voice and our clicks, our eyeballs is what we tune into. And we can't be agnostic. And you can't say, well, it doesn't matter if I'm watching the NFL. It doesn't matter. It's going to continue anyway. But no, if we all collectively decided until these things happen, we're not watching, just like those young brothers at that college said, until that horrible president is ousted, we're not playing. And they only needed to do one game and threaten one game.
That's right. University of Missouri. That's right. That's exactly right.
I just want to know what our response, because we love our things, and I'm guilty too. I watch a lot of trash television.
We're all guilty.
Yes.
Me too.
So because right now some people are feeling, like attacked. Don't feel attacked. I just want us to sit in.
No, you should feel attacked. You should feel attacked, because I'm attacking myself too. That's the first thing. We have to stop being complacent. Right? I mean, we have to attack ourselves. By attack, I mean, we have to ask ourselves, why am I watching this? That's the first thing. We have to dare to change our conditions. Because if we don't, then we can't then say every time somebody is shot by the patrollers, by the police, by the hunters, we're going to go out in the street and protest. Why are you protesting? This started in the homes. This started in the palm of your hand and these devices. The cop watching the same thing you watching. That's why when they're arresting you, they putting the handcuffs on. If you're lucky, they're saying, bro, come on, bro. You need to calm down, bro. Where did that come from? It came from me watching Charles and talking to Shaq. But you ain't Charles or Shaq. Or the ball player from played for the Saints that they killed in Alabama. I mean, they just basically murdered him. Or the brother that got tased in the back by this white woman in the same county in Alabama, just tased him straight up. Oh yeah, So our first responsibility is to feel attacked by ourselves. Let's attack ourselves, because we're all doing it. I wouldn't know about all these. I didn't watch a whole lot of episodes, but I saw Being Mary Jane. Yeah, Insecure, all the reality TV, sure. Sure, the Tyler Perry stuff, Dear White People. Now that one I couldn't swallow. I saw the movie, but I couldn't watch because I know what it is. I watched 2 seasons of Blackish and had that. That's enough. I ain't never seen no episodes of what's the other one, the spinoff, College-ish or
No, Grownish.
Grownish, where she went to school. Thank God it wasn't HBCU at least, but that's what spurred all these damn HBCU-ish. I ain't mad, but I watched it, and you know why? I used to give the excuse, and I still do to a certain or explanation. I watched that because my students watched it. Well, that's true. I don't enjoy it, and although there are moments of levity that are hilarious because Black people are funny. Shannon Sharp funny as hell. But guess what? Then you look up and say, it's been 20 minutes. And I could have got a few more pages done over here, or I could have watched something. And then you get the clean glass of water. You know, as critical as I've been of Rustin, I sat there and watched Rustin. I see Domingo Coleman did a great job in terms of his own persona. And so you see the pain of Bayard Rustin. It's very different than the vehicle that we watched together in Nubia Friday before yesterday in Boycott. But if we're critical, and I don't mean critical to the point of being pedantic, I don't mean we hate everything. I mean being able to understand the impact that these things have on us as a first step, being uncomfortable and being willing to sit in that discomfort. This is what Martin King is writing about, and where do we go from here when he's got that chapter on Black people. It ain't just a white liberal. We can't just put this off on other people. That's why we have to have a governance space to talk to each other and to talk to ourselves in community with each other. Then that discomfort can yield an even greater love, a greater passion, a greater concept of family. That's why we're here at this retreat. Last night, we had a whole conversation. Brother Alfonso Wyatt, who wrote this book called The Mind Hustler. Y'all see, Identifying Self-Destructive Thoughts and Distractions. This is a very interesting brother. He's out of New York, spent his career and working in a number of things, children's services, communications for youth. He's an ordained elder in the AME church. Very interesting with Dr. Wyatt talking about this idea. In fact, as Zakiya was telling me last night that this brother was at a funeral for a young person that had been killed at the hands of another young person of African descent. And there were hundreds of this young person's friends who were there. You know how this happens. I saw it so many times in Philadelphia, it made me sick and inspired at the same time. Sick because of the circumstances, but inspired to see these young people here, hungry, trying to be together, mourning the loss of one of their friends. You know, they wear their white t-shirts with the faces on. And he asked, after the funeral, he asked the mother of the young person that had been slain if it would be okay for him to sit with these hundreds of young people, to just ask them what they were feeling and maybe sit with them and listen to them. And she said yes, and they sat there. You know, we have a responsibility. We have a responsibility as a community to sit with our discomfort and not to look away. So I saw all the episodes of The Real Housewives in the first several seasons. And then, you know, when Andy Cohen started convening his mess fests, you know, watch what happens kind of things, I couldn't watch it anymore. Why? Because I see you, Norman Lear. I'm sorry. I see you, Andy Cohen. You're agent of chaos. And I'm not critiquing you because I have no investment in critiquing you. Like Michael Gomez said in Exchanging Our Country Mark, when that last generation of formerly enslaved Africans were passing away in the 1930s, and they went to interview them and they asked them about, you know, how they were told we got into enslavement. They start talking about people tricking each other and putting each other on, getting on the boat. And then the white interviewer may say, well, what about white people? And they say, well, you know, that's what white people do. We had no expectations. You know, is that overdetermined? Sure it is. But guess what? Are you in danger of being killed by the police at any moment? If I walk out here in the streets of Baltimore, I'm in danger the moment I step out the door. I'm in danger in this room. I'm in danger all the time. So forgive me if I make the sharp distinction, or don't forgive me, because I couldn't give less of a damn. Our responsibility is to restore our sense of self, and that's going to be uncomfortable at certain moments. I mean, to me, that's just, you know.
I mean, there's a sacrifice. We were talking about this a little bit last night.
There's a sacrifice.
I was thinking about, you know, I don't think, you know, the Andy Cohens of the world, or even the Norman Lears are thinking nefariously. They're not thinking. No. They're projecting images of blackness that are harmful for generations. They're not thinking, not like Bob Johnson didn't think, you know, with BET, anything other than I'm making money. I'm making money. I can buy horses for my children. I am successful. No more so than, you know, you know, even a Tyler Perry or whatever. And I think Tyler Perry thinks he's actually doing something because he's absolutely a blessing in Atlanta and to so many actors who weren't given an opportunity. But there's an other cost on the other side of this, and it's why Alvin Toussaint was brought into the Cosby, you know, to make sure that he was being responsible and a good steward of these airwaves. Cosby at least had enough wherewithal to say, I need to have a psychologist rooted in Africana ways of knowing to project the kinds of images that will reverberate for generations to come. And it did, because so many young people went to college because of a different world. So many people in relationship aspired to have a, you know, Cliff and Claire Huxtable type of relationship and raise children that way. It was aspirational because images are powerful, just like the Housewives, all of them. But they make so much money. And now in those spaces like Drink Champs and all Unk and all of them, they make so much money in the YouTube spaces. There's so much money made because we click on it. We are again picking cotton for somebody else as well. We are once again picking tobacco and cotton and sugar cane, and other people are benefiting, and some of them look just like us. And why would they stop? Why would they stop? There's so much wealth. And I know it because I'm purposefully not, you know, leaning in while we're saying, yes, hit the like button if you're on YouTube. Let's freak the algorithms. For me, it's more like, let's get this into the zeitgeist and let's let people know this is something that we want. Let's do the intentionality that they're doing in our destruction, that we also participate. Participate in our savior and our freedom. So, you know,
can I ask you a question about that very specific thing? And what triggered it for me as you were laying that out was, you said we're picking the cotton. In the interview in Ebony, one of the things that Janet Du Bois brought up, she said, you know, my mother worked as a domestic. I remember scrubbing floors. Esther Rolle picked beans in the field. As we think about what we owe to the future generations, I think about, we went to my father's sister's funeral in Virginia a while, about 10 years ago, and my niece and I, my brother's daughter. And so Jamoke and I, we driving down and we passed a cotton field on the way back to Maryland, to DC. And I pulled over. I said, come on. She said, we going out in this field. You ever been in a cotton field? She said, no. I said, all right, we're just gonna go out here and stay in this field for a minute. I want you to bend down, pick this. I mean, it's a small thing, but I don't want you. What do we owe our young? Because again, thinking about, there's a reason why Esther Rolle could go in there and say, or Janet Du Bois could go in there and say, or LaWanda Page in Sanderson could go in there and say, that didn't necessarily transfer to Bernadette Stannis, except because Bernadette Stannis was there. She picks up on it. And so then, you know, what's the sister's name? Marla Evans was in 227, where it played Florence.
Marla
Gibbs. You know, she praises, she said, people wouldn't have known me if not for Norman Lear. Yeah, but you are known forever as Lawrence. I mean, in the same way, but even that, there's nuance. What do we owe to these young people who clearly have the same? I was watching Rasheed Wallace talking with Gilbert Arenas and them, and Kelvin Martin about these bogus referees. The one Donahue, and then the guy that's always got beef with Chris Paul because he told Chris Paul's son to get the hell out of. That's an ass. I'm looking at these brothers. They have the fire, but I'm wondering, what do we owe them in terms of reminding them that these previous generations who had the fire dealt with it this way? I mean, is there something about what's the role of continuity? What do we owe these young people to help?
I mean, you're doing it, J.R. Smith. As you're talking, I'm thinking, you know, the light bulb is coming on among the free, because these brothers are free, so they get to say some things. And again, as long as our comfort and lives are tied to this commerce. And you know, somebody in one of the chats said, you know, and these people own their own platforms and they're still producing minstrelsy because that's how the platforms continue, right? If you can have a platform that feeds like this one, and we can make that sufficient, do you know what I'm saying? We don't need billions of dollars. We're not going out to get a round of funding, you know, because that's an exchange that is.
Once that happens, they've got you. This sister, I'm afraid she's about to lose her job at Harvard because they just sacked the white woman at Penn because the boy said, I'm taking $100 million back. They are in intellectual warfare, and Claudine Gay may be out of a job. She's more qualified than anybody that ever been the president of Harvard. And again, not caping for her, but you're right, money. Go ahead,
Hold on.
Carl.
But what's the role of a president of a college?
Raise that money.
Right. So if somebody's pulling $100 million, she's no longer viable. And
Except they can't stop you.
well,
You
I'm
just
not.
gave us another part of the answer. We've got to
Yeah.
support ourselves. You
Yeah.
should never be in a position like that.
Well, it's what we talk about often, and there's a sacrifice in that too, because you have to, put aside all of it because they're going to put the shiny baubles in front of you. Oh, don't you want this? Don't you want this new car? I'm driving the same car it's paid for. I'm good. As long as you, I wear the same thing, everything. Now I got my own clothes. I'm just gonna put them on. They might. I feel like we won't sit in that long enough to get over, because once you have complete ownership, because I'm saying, how did they get there? How did they get there? Yes, free labor. Okay, not everybody owned people, so the rest of the folk built systems.
Right.
Right. So it's like I'm reading Gladwell's like, oh well, they won't let the Jewish people become lawyers, so they're gonna find a space to be, to dominate in the law realm, right?
Right.
Where you're gonna need them. Like if our thing
And
is
the they is not based on a demographic.
no,
The they
not
is
at
based
all.
on a culture, which is one of the lessons we have to. We talk about black is not demographic. We got a cultural thing. So when a child, like I said,
I'm sorry. I shouldn't even brought up Jewish people because we see it in Chinatown. We see it with the halal.
No, but the common element is a cultural, is a momentum of memory. It's not a critique. I mean, Marcus Garvey said that when literally during the Balfour Agreement, 1917, and then forward, he said, as Palestine to the Jew, Africa for the Africans, those at home and those abroad. Now that is problematic in terms of settler colonialism, but what even Garvey is recognizing is there's an animating force behind this idea that there's a we. So what does it mean to belong to somebody who says we have a memory? Now you can critique it, you can argue, but what you can't, to the point you're raising, what you can't dismiss easily is the fact that that notion of we animates behavior. Right? We got to have a we. And that we can help humanity ultimately, but I mean, when I say a child, but when a teenager like Bernadette Stannis, who was in her second year at Juilliard studying music, when they made the call for Good Times, if that's all you have, you're gonna take it. Imagine what Bernadette Stannis could have done if there had been Black platform and Black structures where she could have continued to practice her craft as a musician, as she added acting and said, I mean, now I looked at this Family Jewels, and now they dropped it on a Family Business, whatever. She's in there playing somebody mom. The whole thing is, what's this guy, Carl Weber, with this knob? And I'm saying, because that's where it is. Where's the other thing? You're not going to see her off Broadway. You're not going to see her in the Black theater, regional theater. But you're making a very important point. Without institutions, what are our people going to do who have these talents, these frustrations, these dreams? But that's, of course, you helping to remedy that.
And we can't throw up our hands and like abdicate it, because I look at even the Sikhs in the trucking industry. Those of you who are in the trucking industry, y'all been in the trucking industry how many years? But to come in with a purpose and a plan, it was like, all right. And there's you can't be mad about it either.
No.
Build the system, and it's okay.
Build
But
it.
and also take back your talent, because if you all did it, like in Boycott, if we all did it, Boycott proved that.
Come on. In
Yeah,
fact,
it took a year.
but it did. I mean, Joni Asbury said this when we were talking about the Montgomery Burroughs boycott last week in WPFW. She said, this is something that we could easily study. The 381 days of the boycott, we should probably devote 381 days of studying what they did to learn the lessons for what we can do today. It's not just a date that we commemorate. How did they build this network? The car pools, how did they get the insurance? What were the Black banks they put the money in? We said, you're romanticizing. No, because if we are romanticizing, it's after studying. But people critique, say, well, why are we studying the past? So we can get that momentum of memory. And that's a very valuable lesson. One that, by the way, we're going to continue Monday night with office hours. We're doing the second of Du Bois's speeches at HBCUs. This is his 1908 speech, Galileo Galilei. This is his first speech at Fisk. He came back for his 20th anniversary of his graduation. And it's almost like I said, there's something ancestral going on, because with this attempted crucifixion of these Ivy League presidents, or moving them out of their jobs, I don't want to overburden the metaphor. Du Bois is asking, what is the purpose of education? He's telling these Fisk students, skill development is necessary to make a living. But if you don't know why you've developed the skills, which is why we have to expand our minds, then skill development is not going to help us. And he said, philanthropy is coming in now to try to shape what's going. He said, I came back to Fisk to get this talk because they gave a bunch of money and these people want to make a vocational education program at Fisk, and I had to step in. They said, you want to come speak? He said, yeah, I'm coming to speak because this got to shut down. And he uses Galileo because he said when Galileo, who knew that the earth moved around the sun, when they brought him before the Inquisition and was like, does the sun move around the earth? He lied and said, yes. And he said, from that moment, you're going to be faced in moments when you have to make a choice. Claudine Gay made a choice. And guess what? That is going to result in some things that are going to be very unpleasant for her, already unpleasant. You got people who can't spell talking about she's a diversity hire. See, that's what happens when you don't have people that will fight back because we don't have institutions. When Du Bois says Galileo lied, what he's telling those young people, and he goes on to do that, we'll talk about this Monday night. He says, in those moments of confrontation, that's when your character is shaped. And everything that happens after that, that trajectory is moved. Now, whatever happens to President Gay, whatever happens to President of MIT or Penn, or whatever happens to any of us, at the end of the day, the same night awaits us all. You can't live forever. You can live to 101 or 100, but guess what? Or 2. But at the end of the day, we're all going. The question is, what did you do in the moments that you were here? And you're helping us with that, Prof. I mean, again, what we're doing, what we're all doing here collectively, we are standing in a truth, and we're making this journey step by step.
I'm grateful and hopeful and optimistic, and because we have done it. Everyone's like, oh well, we can't. I'm like, well, we have.
Right?
Why can't we do it again? We have. This whole nation that we are in right now was built. If we built that, why can't we build the next thing? It's not just Rosewood and Greenwood and all of but they're going to come in here. All right. So do we stop building? Do we stop coming together? Do we stop challenging one another? Do we stop holding each other accountable? Do we stop holding ourselves accountable? Do we stop because people are evil? They're going to stay being evil.
Right. Right. And no, we can't stop. And we can't stop. Yeah. So
I'm thinking
I'm gonna go down here to these folks. Oh, I should mention, don't go anywhere. I should just raise the name of our dear sisters who made transition very unexpectedly. She was teaching her course, the way I understand it, and suffered an aneurysm, and then made transition last week. Dr. Gabe Byron, just a brilliant sister, a theologian. She came to work at Howard University at the time that the former dean, Alton Pollard, of the School of Divinity, had brought her in. One of her specialties was Ethiopian Christianity, early Christian church. We had her talk to the freshmen in our freshman seminar, the now defunct freshman seminar, about the relationship of Africa to Christianity. Brilliant sister. She has 2 sons who, we are sending our prayers and surrounding them. But Gay Byron was one of those sisters who spoke truth to power, and she did it right up until her last breath. So we had no choice, Prof. We have no choice but to continue. I mean, we're here, so why not?
Yes. I'm going to be forever grateful to Audra Asamoah for bringing you up that day, that Veterans Day. And, it has literally changed the trajectory of my life. And
mine too.
Set us on a course. But that's the other thing. None of this happens without collaboration. There's no singular force, there's no singular person. There's no, like we worship, even Jesus had 12 disciples. Let me just say that.
And then you counting Mary Magdalene. No question. His girlfriend.
All of the Marys.
Sorry.
No. Okay.
Right.
All of the Marys. But
all
again,
the Marys.
Yeah, we've been conditioned to worship individuals, but systems. You keep saying they can't beat the systems, and that's community and that's collective. So
that's right.
That's right. Thank you.
That's right. No, thank you. Love you.
Go do your thing. I love you too. I love
you. Let me run now. I gotta look here and see. Oh yeah. I gotta get downstairs.
For that libation. All right.
Yes, ma'am. Love you.
All right, y'all. See y'all in them Nubian streets as well. Have a wonderful weekend, everyone.
This country, there never had been one in the whole of the country. And I risk my job by saying I won't do it unless you give me a husband for my children.